Line's good.
Never on.
Whoa.
Hard. Hardly.
Come on, Brent.
Line's good.
Got real close.
I hear high, right?
Try and hit 2/3.
Have they saved it for her? Yes, they have.
Ooh, welcome to Game of Stones, everybody. I am Sean Graham, Scott alongside, as always. Hello, Scott.
Sean, I got to tell you something. I'm feeling super cozy today in my new Game of Stones hoodie.
Hey, all right, it arrived.
Yes, it's here. It's warm and cozy and just perfect on a chilly fall afternoon.
Wow. Well, congratulations. I'm glad you like it. I will warn you that there's some fluff involved before the first wash.
Oh, yeah.
So
well
just
aware.
prepare for that. But that's great. I love my two hoodies. Super comfy. It's very rainy and cool here in the nation's capital on a Monday. So yeah, you're right. That would be a perfect option for today.
Yeah, I just had to put my blinds up so I could see. And yes, I think it is still rainy and gray.
Yeah. But another piece of information here as we are talk on September the 27th, Scott, in a few hours, you and I are scheduled to play in a curling match.
Oh my gosh, that's right. I almost forgot.
Yeah, tonight, the late draw at the Ottawa Curling Club. It's the first night of the Monday Open League. Team Griffin is back in all of its might. We had a pretty good year last year in the limited games we played. Maybe that's just because I'm remembering the games I skipped because we won most of them.
That's true, Sean. That's true. We did. I see we're up in the C division to start out of 4. So, we'll see what happens.
Well, we'll have to see how it plays out. But I'm excited to be back in the saddle playing. Might have an extra episode this week talking a little bit about our experience and just in general, the return to play, what it looks like this year, what's different from what we all experienced last year. So keep an eye out on the feed for that. But we are here right now to discuss what happened over the last 5 days here in Ottawa as the pre-trials took place here at the RA Center. First event at the new Performance Center here in Ottawa. It's going to take a bit of adjustment. If you watched any of the game last night, there was a bit of a leak from the roof. So, it's not a perfect system quite yet, but I'm sure they'll get there in time. The RA Center, it is a hockey pad that they're going to use now for ice for their recreational curling facility. It'll be there, but it'll also be there as a high performance center. So expect to see a lot more of these type of events, these mid-level type events being here in Ottawa, where Curling Canada has this facility. They have the resources to use. And so I'm excited about the potential of what that could be, not just for the national programs, but even locally, having facility with really good ice, arena quality ice. You can get really good ice at some of the other facilities here in the city, but Scott, this could be a really good thing for curling recreationally here in the city.
Yeah, I'm thinking about the mixed doubles, like little tour that we have here in Ottawa, maybe some of the city championships style bonspiels that we have near the end of the year could be a great facility for those. So yeah, I mean, overall, I'm impressed, and I'm not going to say no to more high performance curling happening in our own backyard.
Yeah. Absolutely. So Scott, let's talk about what happened, and let's start with the trials direct entry. This was the 3 spots for 5 women's teams. We'll start on the women's side, and the division here was a round robin, and then there was a playoff situation, which on the Curling Canada website is listed officially as a tiebreaker. And I'll say this just up front. The format for the direct entry trials, men's and women's, I still don't fully understand how it worked. So,
yeah,
we won't get too much into the weeds on it. I will say this, though, that I know that there were teams who were participating in it who were upset, who didn't like all of the machinations of it. And I didn't talk to them specifically, but because we had access as media, you could see some of the discussions that were going on, and not everybody was particularly thrilled with the situation. So we won't get into all of that, but let's just say that this was the format. The format was the format. I don't fully understand how they came to this conclusion, but they did, and teams are going to the trials because of it. And let's just leave it there, Scott.
Yeah, let's leave it there. So, Sean, the way I understood things on the women's side, that there was essentially the two teams that finished the round robin 3-1 got through.
Yeah, so that's Casey Scheidegger and Kelsey Rock each go 3-1 through the round robin.
That's right. Casey Scheidegger, they lost their first and then went on a run after that. They lost their first to Laura Walker. Won 3 in a row after that. And then Team Kelsey Rock, they had to win their last. So it was a bit of the same thing. Their first game was actually against Scheidegger in Scheidegger's second game. They lost that one and then ran the table after that. So that big win in the last game got them to a record of 3-1 and got them right into the trials. The third spot is where a bit of the confusion happened for me, because I would have thought, okay, well, Laura Walker's team finished 2-2. Well, they're the third place team, so they should be able to go, but not the case. They didn't want anybody, I assume, finishing 500 or worse and getting an automatic bid. So the third place team, Laura Walker, played the fourth place team and had to lose twice on Sunday. That was the way it was set up. So Corinne Brown at 1-3 was the fourth place team by virtue of a head-to-head win over Suzanne Burt, who we'll talk about in a minute. And then so had to play spoiler and win twice against Laura Walker. Won the first game, made it interesting, forced us to come back at 8 p.m.
Yeah.
But it was ultimately not to be.
It was not to be. The game last night got a little out of hand, and the breaks in play. So there was a leak from the roof at the RA Center last night, and John Wall had to come out, and credit to John Wall. Great form. He brought out a curling stone and was sort of going back and forth over the spot after he scraped it and repebbled it. So full credit to John Wall for being able to make that sheet playable during that game last night. But the situation there was that the game kind of got out of control, out of hand. A big number for Laura Walker. She really controlled the scoreboard well, where in the earlier game, Corinne Brown had a chance late to end the game, score a 6 in the 9th, and she missed on her last one. They win the game, it doesn't matter, but it seemed like it was kind of two opposite games there. In the first game, Corinne Brown, in the second half of the game, kind of took control, had that big chance to score that 6. And then in the second game, we saw more of what we saw in the first half of the earlier game, where Laura Walker was the one in control.
Yeah. Exactly like you said, Sean. Polar opposites in those games. And like the second game, long day for both teams, long week, really.
Yeah.
And Laura Walker comes out and scores that 3 spot in the first end, and you're thinking, okay, she wants to get out of here.
Yeah, I think she gets a force and a 2, right? It was 5-1.
Yeah, it was 5-1, and it seemed like they'd run out of gas. But
yeah,
credit to Team Brown, they did scratch back.
Yeah, I was surprised they didn't shake after 9, to be honest. Like, you think, long week, I'm exhausted, I'm down 4, but they went for it. They even looked at maybe a potential crazy split on the latter part of the end, but it just wasn't there. So they gave it everything they had. Good, full credit to them. And now they and Suzanne Burt will head off to the pre-trials out in Liverpool, Nova Scotia next month. Suzanne Burt, tough week for her. The only game she wins is actually against Laura Walker in her last one to get Laura Walker down to that 2-2 position. Disappointing for them, but they will have that chance to go to Nova Scotia. A little more practice under their belt as they get there. Maybe they'll be in better form. They've had these high-level games here in a pressure situation, so we'll see how that goes at the pre-trials. Anything else here, Scott, from this side? I didn't see much of Scheidegger. I did note, we'll talk about this with Jill Brothers too, that Casey Scheidegger herself was wearing the vest over the team jacket. Always a curious choice when you have all the sponsors there, I find. But it was,
Sean,
It was
chilly.
cold. Yeah, it was cold in
Yeah.
there. It was very cold in that arena, but they played great, going 3-1. A terrific week for them. The only game they lost was their opener to Laura Walker, and then win pretty comfortably the rest of the way if you're looking at point differential. So they do a good job there. And then Kelsey Rock, great win for her. I was there Wednesday when they got their first win against Laura Walker, or maybe that was Friday. I can't remember.
Yeah, Wednesday.
So
Oh,
I was no, I think that was
yeah,
whenever it
Friday.
was.
It was
Yeah,
Friday.
Friday night. I was in the building to get that win. That was a really good game and real good back and forth. Some tight shots, great sweeping. That was a real entertaining game. It was a little far away from where I was standing, but that was a terrific game, back and forth. Those are two really good teams that I think we've talked about it before. We'll see what happens in Alberta. Those two teams going back and forth, and you got Selena Sturmey out there as well, among others. So
Yeah.
Alberta is quite interesting as we move forward, but a great week for them. And so they'll be new. Kelsey Rock making her debut at the trials. Ferguson and Brown, of course, will not be making their debuts at the trials, but Kelsey Rock will be, and it'll be fun to see how she does in that week.
Yeah. Some young blood coming up. Danielle Schimmelman is their third too.
Yes.
So that will be her first foray into the national level as part of the four-person team.
Yeah, because she played with John Morris at the mixed doubles last year. Yeah, had a good run there into the playoffs, I believe.
Absolutely. So I think the three teams that were probably favored were the three that went through.
Yeah, I think so. I agree.
I was a little bit surprised that Laura Walker needed all those games to get there, but
sure.
Overall, I don't think we're that surprised, and we'll see Suzanne Burt and Corinne Brown at the pre-trials in Liverpool. How do you peg their odds when we get to the pre-trials?
The pre-trials, they're going to be tough. There's so many teams. There's so few spots. We'll talk about the format for that once we get to it, but it's going to be tough. And whoever earns their spot out of that is really going to earn it. And, you lose a couple games early or someone's not feeling great. I don't know, Scott. I think that the depth is too good there to say that they're definitively the two favorites.
Yeah, I think that's probably fair. And we will talk more about those teams that have already qualified for that when we get to that event in not too far from now, Sean. Like maybe
3 weeks,
a month,
4 weeks,
3 weeks.
Yeah, it's coming up fast and fierce. It's getting late early here in the curling season for some teams. So let's shift on over to the men's side. A little more clarity here, slightly. So on the men's side, you had 5 teams competing for 2 spots. And you had a situation here where Team Dunstone, Team McEwen go through. They go 3-1 through the round robin each. And then there's a little qualifying round where they each won another game against Flash and Gunlickson. Or they won 2 more games, excuse me. I, again, don't fully understand why they did it this way, but they did. And Dunstone and McEwen were the 2 clear best teams out of these ones this week. So they get to go through. Howard Flash and Gunlickson do not. I will say this for Colton Flash. I was there Wednesday night, that first game. Colton Flash, I think he should have won the game. He made a really big mistake in not a mistake. That seems harsh. There was a problem in the fourth end. He was sitting 1 behind cover. Mike McEwen had a stone out in the 12-foot. Mike McEwen had the hammer, and Flash decided to play it aggressively to try to come in, sit 2, maybe even steal 2, but the stone over curled and rubbed the guard and gave McEwen a relatively open hit for the 2, and that kind of turned the game because McEwen's team struggled. Reed had a couple big misses that you don't see very often from him, and McEwen bailed them out with some doubles in that game, and that real shift there in the fourth end in a game that ended up 5-3, and that was the big turning point in the fourth end. So a tough break for Flash there, but they played hard. If you look at their scores, they were a lot closer than the scores would indicate. Played well, and they'll be a force at that pretrial.
I think so. I'm trying to wrap my head around still how they made this modified round robin, Sean, but
they did it. That's all that matters.
They did it, yeah.
They did.
Because there was a scheduled game yesterday morning between Flash and Howard.
Yeah, but it was
But
unnecessary.
yeah, what happened was neither team could catch the second place team at that point by winning. So it was deemed unnecessary
Yeah.
and thus wasn't played.
Yeah, so everyone gets to go home earlier than expected. So Scott, with Dunstone and McEwen, we've seen McEwen obviously at trials before. He almost won in 2017. Obviously a different team though. Dunstone has been there as well. I think everyone on the team has been at a trials. So it'll be fun to see them there. I mean, I think coming into the week, these were the two teams we would have expected to move forward. And out of the teams that are moving, like the teams who were here in Ottawa, we wondered what are the chances that one of them could be the Olympic representative for Canada. And there was nothing that I saw out of either Dunstone or McEwen that would make me think that they don't have a chance to win.
Yeah. I would put the odds a little more in favor of Dunstone. Their team's a little more consistent, but yeah, like Mike's one of the best players in the world and can get hot for a week just like anybody, right?
Absolutely. And if he played the way he played this week and the team improves just a little bit from where they were this week in the games I saw, at least, they'll be a tough out, no question about it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, if you're not one of the favorites going in, what you really want is to be a tough out, right?
Yeah.
Just knowing that we can play with anybody, maybe the breaks will go our way. Maybe we'll catch lightning in a bottle and win it.
Absolutely. And that's all you need. It's a shorter event than a national championship in terms of games. I think you're there for just as long, but because you have the men and women playing together, a little shorter or same amount of time, but fewer games. And yeah, you can just catch that lightning in a bottle. We've seen it before at the trials.
Yes, we have. Yeah. Yes, we have.
All right. Well, let's shift on over, Scott, to the pre-trials on the women's side. Now, I will say this for the pre-trials. This format made sense. This was a straight ABC draw, and there was the progress that you normally see at a Spiel. Now, and this was a true ABC draw too. This wasn't the fake nonsense way that the Slams try to say, oh, it's a triple knockout. No, Slams, I'm not buying your nonsense because you don't actually have a triple knockout. This was realer than what the Slams do. So the winner of the A and the winner of the B draws played each other, and the winner got through, and the loser of that game played the winner of the C draw for the second spot. So it was like getting to the way the playoffs will work at the trials. 3 teams in, similar to that, except for that you have a loss that you could take in the playoffs and still get through. So on the women's side, great story during the week. Kerry Galusha runs the table, beats Sarah Wark, Ashley Howard, Jessie Hunkin to win the A side, then beats Hunkin again in the first qualifying game. That was Saturday evening, wins it 9-8. And Kerry Galusha is going to the pre-trials. I believe this is her first appearance at a pre-trial, Scott.
Yeah. It's a really nice story. We talked about them in our preview that they were coming off a couple of really good events, one win and one second place finish. And we thought that they could keep this momentum going and roll it in. And we saw them. Yeah, they just rolled. They did have to beat Jessie Hunkin in an extra end for that first qualifying spot. But, they had hammer. They took care of business. They were able to do it. So really great to see the team from the North going to be there in Liverpool. We talked already about how tough that field is going to be. And, I assume they're going to go home and then come back. So who knows what can happen, but hopefully they keep some of this mojo because they're a fun team to watch.
Yeah, no question. Yeah, like I say, 2 finals to start out the season, 1 win, and now this. So a great story there. The other team that gets through is Jill Brothers, coming not quite out of nowhere, but if you had looked up on the morning of September 24th, you would have said, okay, Jill Brothers, probably not a chance, because they lost their first 2 games. Scott, they lose to Laurie St. George in the first game, and then they lost to Lauren Mann in their second game. So they had to run the gamut through the C draw, and they do that, getting some revenge on Laurie St. George, then beats Ashley Howard in a game I watched. It was right in front of me, but I couldn't quite see the houses very well. But Kim Kelly played so good in that game. And at one point, I didn't realize it was Kim Kelly, and I looked, and I was like, oh, that person could be related to Kim Kelly, like maybe her daughter or niece or something. I did a double take, and like, holy crap, that's actually Kim Kelly.
Yeah.
Just out here making crazy shots. She made a run double around some of the Ashley Howard stones, and Russ Howard was there as the coach for Ashley Howard. And so Ashley Howard calls the timeout. As Russ is coming out, he says to Kim Kelly, that was nasty. And Kim Kelly just looks at him and goes, I know. It's like, yeah, you're an assassin, Kim Kelly. It was great.
Yeah, I'm good.
So she wins that, beats Lauren Mann in the C semifinal of sorts, then beats Team Jones in the C finals to get that spot. And with Jesse Hunkin losing to Kerry Galusha, you saw that game yesterday morning, Scott. We were there for it, where Jill Brothers beat Jesse Hunkin in a game that was streamed, but I don't think anyone's necessarily going to send the video of it to the Hall of Fame, but Jill Brothers will take it.
Yeah, I'll say I felt like Team Brothers was in control, right?
Yeah, I agree.
I made that joke at after the fourth end when they had, forced, taken two. I said, oh, you just do that, you're going to win the game pretty easy. They immediately give up a 3. And I'm thinking, oh, geez, did I jinx it? But Brothers, they regroup, get the 3 right back, then get a steal in the 8th, which it seemed to me like Jessie had, she was really light on her draws at the beginning of the game. And it seemed like she was trying to compensate for it a bit at the end, and things were coming a bit heavy. Kristen Streifel, the same thing, was a bit heavy on draws towards the end of the game, which you don't expect, right? You sort of expect as the game goes on, maybe it gets a bit frosty, draws start digging in and stopping, but it wasn't the case yesterday.
No, it wasn't. Yeah, everything was deep, and Jessie was off all day, really. And I'm sure she would say that just a little off with the weight control, and wasn't able to get it done. But again, credit to Jill Brothers. A great week for them to come through the C-Traw. That is so hard to do.
Such a grind, yeah.
Yeah, so congratulations to them. They will be the home team out there in Liverpool for the pre-trials.
Yeah, and if we can get more Kim Kelly on our TVs come pre-trials time, all for that.
I'm okay with it. Absolutely. Over on the men's side, we had a bit of an upset, perhaps. Team Robert, Scott, runs the table. They go through the A side, and they then win in the qualifying game. They beat JT Ryan, who came through the B side. But for Roberts, they go through Weeb, Meacham, and Chambers, and really, almost like a hot knife through butter in this field. It's kind of surprising, but great on them. It'll be fun to see them at the pre-trial, see how they hold up over the course of that week as the situation intensifies and you get different teams in there. But we talked last week about how we would want or hope for a team from Quebec to be successful and be a regular presence at these events, and these guys certainly had a wonderful week.
Yeah, I think we might be looking at the future of Quebec curling. Is that too much to say?
Maybe, but who knows?
But who knows? But no, it's nice to see, like you say, some Quebec representation at these levels, especially with an event that was so skewed to Manitoba. I think we talked about it. There was 8 teams. I think 5 of them were from Winnipeg. So, if you'd picked 3 Winnipeg teams coming out or 2 Winnipeg teams coming out, not a bad pick, but Team Roberts was there to say, not so fast.
Yeah, so a great week for them. And then I mentioned JT Ryan. He went through the B side, but then Sean Grassie doing his best Jill Brothers impression coming through the C side. He also lost his first 2 games, first to JT Ryan and then to Willie Lyburn. And then he goes through Jacques Gauthier, Ryan Weeb, Sean Meacham, Corey Chambers to get into that second qualifying game yesterday afternoon. And in an extra, beats JT Ryan. So Sean Grassie gets into the pre-trials. Scott, they're not the same age, but is Sean Grassie the new Darcy Robertson?
Ooh, just show up and make playoffs.
Yeah, like
Hmm.
where is this coming from? I mean, he's a good player. We've seen him do well at Manitoba Provincials in playoffs, pushing the McEwens, the Gunlicksons of the world in those games. But we've also seen him make some interesting calls, and just the precision isn't quite there that you would see at the top level. So again, I didn't have super high expectations, but they're a team that's going to come out, they're going to compete, and they're going to give you a good game for sure.
Yeah, I wonder if familiarity was at all at play here. Is they played 7 games this week, and I think they were all against other Manitoba teams.
Meacham's
Right.
Saskatchewan, isn't
Yes, Meacham is Saskatchewan. My bad. So one province over.
he? Yeah, all prairie teams.
But holy cow, yeah, I mean, good on them. They knew what was in front of them and
Yep.
just kept marching, one foot after the other.
Yeah, so well done to them. Tough break there for JT Ryan and his team. Kind of interesting though that they actually were not going to play much this year, if at all. JT Ryan's working in a mine in Northern Ontario. The rest of the team is in school, with the exception of Joey Hart, who was added to this team for this event because the normal second could not participate. So they just called up Joey Hart and he said, sure, I'll come play with you. And so these guys were kind of playing with house money over the course of the week, and to get into the B final, win that, a great job for them. We'll see what happens. You know, school life happens with these guys, and we'll see what JT Ryan wants to do. He had success at the junior level, and we've seen individuals have difficulty making the switch to the men's level. And you know, he's started on his career, and the rest of the team's in school. So we'll just see if they want to continue down this path. If they do, they're good and they'll have success at least at some level. But you know, real life gets in the way sometimes, Scott.
Yes, it can. Yes, it can.
So elsewhere, the only other thing I wanted to mention, because we talked about it last week, Jacques Gauthier, his team, they struggled a little bit. They won their first game, but that was it for them. So we'll see what the future holds for Jacques Gauthier. I've suggested on this show the next super team out of Manitoba could be a JT Ryan, Jacques Gauthier amalgamation of sorts, but we'll see what happens there. So otherwise, not too much to report out of the pre-trials. So as we look forward, the men's teams going to the pre-trials from this event in Ottawa, who will be moving ahead to Liverpool. It is Sean Grassie, Roberge, Howard, Flash, Gunlickson.
That's right, Sean. That's right. And they'll join the following teams at the pre-trials. That'll be Pat Simmons making a comeback with somebody else's team. Jonathan Buke with the former Scott McDonald team. Braden Calvert, Tyler Tardy, Jeremy Hardy out of Alberta, Karsten Sturmey, Pat Ferris from Ontario, Paul Fleming, and in what might be his last event, Mike Fournier.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, he announced his retirement.
So just those names there. Any one or two stand out to you?
Oh, it's tough. You know, I mean, I think the rooting interest is for Mike Fournier. Like, how cool would it be for him to get to the trials? But I think, you know, Pat Simmons is an interesting one. Playing with that young team, could he make enough shots at the end of the game to win? But I kind of think it's going to be two of the teams that we saw, if I'm being honest, here, whether Howard, Flash, or Gunlickson. I think two of those three. If I had to sort of handicap it right now, I would put the odds in their favor.
Yeah, I think if I was to take a flyer on anyone, it would be Tyler Tardy.
Yeah.
But Gunner, Howard, or Flash, those are probably the safer bets. Pat Simmons playing with, I just looked at it, Colton Lott, Kyle Doring, and Tanner Lott. So that team.
It's a young team.
And out of Winnipeg, yeah, and then Pat Simmons.
Yeah, so we'll see if that works. If that works out well in terms of having that experience at the back end. Hopefully for them, it does. And I think just in terms of the development of the sport and having new players compete at the highest level early in their career, I think if you can get that, if Tyler tried to get through, that's a huge win for them to get through that trials and playing in the trials in 2021 when they're not going to be considered at least a legitimate threat to win that event. I'll tell you, in 2025, they will be.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So on the women's side, Sean, what do we got?
Didn't we already do this?
I guess we already talked about the women. But here, I'll go through the list of teams into the pre-trials, and we can go through this exercise of does anyone stand out to you?
Okay.
So from this event this weekend, we've got Corinne Brown and Suzanne Burt, Kerry Galusha and Jill Brothers. They will join a lot of teams from Manitoba and Ontario. So Mackenzie Zacharias,
Yeah.
Beth Peterson, Justin Murphy, Holly Duncan, Krista McCarville, Darcy Robertson, Danielle Inglis, Jackie Harrison, and then Sherry Anderson and Penny Barker from Saskatchewan.
Okay. That's a pretty good field, I have to say. Like that's
yeah. This would be like the field that I would expect at like the tier 2 event for the Slam.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I
like
agree,
these are the teams that you would expect to see in that kind of an event.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think out of those, just initial reaction would be Krista McCarville, Mackenzie Zacharias would be my two that kind of stand out that I might expect. Beth Peterson didn't have the greatest week at the Scotties last year, but she's really good. It'll be tough to get through that field, though.
Oh yeah. I'm with you, Krista McCarville. You know, we're going to be rooting for Danielle Inglis, great person on the Curling Canada team,
local to us too.
Local to us, yeah. Holly Duncan's team, you know, another local Ontario team. Justin Murphy, they've got a good story. I think her mom is still playing with her this year. So yeah, lots of fun names there. But McCarville is my number one pick to come out, and gun to my head, I might pick Corinne Brown second.
Yeah. Okay. It's going to be fun to watch.
Absolutely.
So Scott, we had the opportunity to be there. Now you weren't feeling great early in the week. Fortunately, it wasn't COVID. You went and got tested. And so you waited until you were feeling better before you went into the building. So I went to a couple of draws. You went to the one draw. But just in general, how would you describe the experience of being there, the RA Center, and just the idea of having this event? Obviously very unusual given the circumstances of the world over the past 18 months. But just what were your impressions of the week?
It was just nice to have this kind of event in our own backyards. You know, we were able to watch on YouTube. That stream was available for everyone. Big shout out to Curling Canada for making that available as a way to follow this event. I like to think that Sean, you tweeting about the event throughout was helping to build up, you know, some of the curling Twitter's engagement over the week. And it just felt like kind of nice to have curling back, as weird as it sounds. I hadn't been in the building for an event since the Brier of 2020, and being back kind of felt like, this is right. This is good.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously it would be nice with more people there, with the fans there, but you know, having it be a curling event for some real stakes, it was nice.
Yeah, we were the only people there who weren't competing to go to the Olympics, employed by Curling Canada, or somehow contracted to Curling Canada. We were the only ones in the building, not that. But it was fun, you know. It was fun to see. It was fun to have these teams out there. It was kind of cool to see off the ice too, because you don't see that as much. And I said last week we would try to have audio. The infrastructure wasn't there the same way it normally is at a Curling Canada event. And the players were, I'm sure if I had gone up and asked to talk to any of them on the record, that they would have said yes, because that's typically how curlers are. Like they're not usually going to say no. They're very polite in that regard. but they weren't necessarily warned that would be there. So and the situation was such that there just wasn't the space, I felt, to do it in a way that I felt comfortable with. So
Mhm.
that's why we don't have audio from the players. But I felt like it was a really good event. It was well put together. Certainly the testing ground of the RA Center is a center of excellence. I think it passed its initial test. Some improvements for sure. I felt really good about the protocols that were in place. You had to scan in, you had to scan out. There were temp checks. Everyone had to submit their proof of vaccination in advance.
Mhm.
So, you felt good about the protocols. I kept my mask on the whole time. Players didn't have to, but as soon as you weren't playing, you had to keep your mask on the whole time. So I felt very comfortable with that. And I will also say this, that we over the past 3 years have been critical of just the way the sport is going at the highest level, that there's no space, or there's less space right now for the middle class teams, that everything seems to be catered to those teams that are going to be in the slams every year, who have a legitimate chance of representing their countries at the Olympics. And the Mike Fourniers of sorts, if you listen to Ryan and Jonathan on Rocks Across the Pond last week, they commented on this, that Mike Fournier might be the last of those better than
Mm.
a recreational player, wants to play on tour a little bit, enters the provincials every year. Like Mike Fournier is one of the last of that type of a player. What Curling Canada did here, not for the trials direct entry, those teams are fine. For the pre trials, they didn't have to do this. They
No.
didn't have to spend this money. They didn't have to create this event at all. They could have just said they could have had a cutoff at 2 more teams or 3 more teams in the pre-trials and not done this. But the fact that they did it, the fact that they gave an opportunity to a mix of the young guys and women and some of the more experienced ones, like Sean Grassie, Jill Brothers, she's been around for a while, like giving them an opportunity to compete. And they're not going to be the Olympic representative in all likelihood.
Mhm.
But having them, or presenting this opportunity, we talk about there has to be a carrot, there has to be a reward for going out and playing, for practicing. You want teams to continue to strive for something. This was something like that. And yes, it would have been better if there could have been fans there, but the reality is that it couldn't. And this was a major expense for Curling Canada that they didn't have to do. They did not have to spend this money on this. And sure, there might be some selfish benefits of just testing out the facility, but providing this to those teams who lost a full season last year, giving them this space to play competitive games, high level environment, kudos to Curling Canada. Absolutely well done. And I will not be as critical for like a month.
Yeah, I got a big old what they say in the military, bravo Zulu.
Yeah.
To Curling Canada for this. You're right. They they didn't have to do this, but it's nice that in our sport still there's a way, there's a path for everyone, right?
Yeah.
Like we could start a team tomorrow with the goal of making it to the Olympics. It's not likely, but it's possible that we could do it
Yeah.
just by winning, right? Just go in and win. And that's what I like the most about curling is the meritocracy, in that sense that everyone has a chance if they put in the work. And you're right, these teams are likely not going to be the Olympic representatives, but they could, like, because they're there and they're playing, they could.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And I think you got to keep that aspect in curling as well.
Yeah, and again, Jonathan and Ryan talked about it last week on their show with the new World Championship format, or the qualification championship, or the qualification format for the World Championship. That there is actually a pretty easy fix to it that would allow for every team, in theory, in the world to potentially be the world champion that year. And that is what's great about the sport, is that it's democratic in that if you go, you win, you keep going, and no one's going to stop you. So that's what I like about it. And Curling Canada, again, didn't have to. They did it. Good on them. And the format for the trials direct entry event didn't make sense to me. So what? who cares?
So what? Yeah.
As long as it made sense to somebody, then great. And the format for the pre-trials or the pre-trials made sense, worked. Give opportunities to those teams. Full kudos to Curling Canada. So a couple other quick notes from the weekend, Scott. We had some events out west. Chelsea Carey was very entertaining on Twitter, noting that her invite to Ottawa got lost in the mail. So she was playing at the Craven event out in Saskatchewan. Not surprisingly, she was playing against a bunch of Saskatchewan teams and comes out on top in Craven. I'll just say, Google up the music festival in Craven. There's some hilarious things that come out of that every year. But for curling, good win for Chelsea Carey. We obviously will not see them at the pre-trials or at the trials, but they will be a force potentially in those Saskatchewan playdowns and then maybe at the Scotties.
Yeah, I think if they can get through Sherry Anderson, I would put them as the favorite. I know Jesse Hunkin's team was here in Ottawa this week. They'll also be a contender, but when you've got Chelsea Carey throwing skip stones, she's easily the top skip in Saskatchewan. Apologies to the aforementioned Sherry Anderson. And she's teamed up with some greats from Saskatchewan. Jolene Campbell playing with Stephanie Schmidt, who is one of my favorite gifs of all time, when she made like this crazy shot and just sort of like shook her head like, I don't know. I made the gif. That's why I like it. Nobody uses it. And then Jennifer Armstrong as lead. That's a strong team. And I could see them making some noise, not only in provincials, but at the Scotties as well.
Yeah, so a good week for them to get that win. The other event we wanted to talk about is the Okotoks Classic that was out, of course, in Okotoks. And Kevin Cooey comes out on top in that event. Scott, I just want to point out how imbalanced the playoffs were. And it's not a criticism of the people in Okotoks. This is how it played out just based on the results coming into the playoffs. But on one side of the bracket, you had Brendan Botcher, Karsten Sturmey, and Kevin Cooey.
Yeah.
On the other side of the bracket, you had Jaap van Dorp, Nathan Mulberg, and Ross White. I'm not saying that those are not balanced, but if you put those on a scale, it would very much be tipped to one side.
Yes. Ross White, great junior team. I guess they're not juniors anymore. They're out of Scotland.
Yeah.
Kevin Cooey wins that over them on Sunday. I saw the Brendan Botcher team Twitter feed that said, every morning I brush my teeth and I look at this note on my mirror that says, I don't have to play Cooeys at provincials this year.
Yes.
It's
and that's
the biggest
good.
perk of winning the Brier.
Yeah, biggest perk. You get through that Alberta stretch of not. Yeah, that's just an absolute minefield out in Alberta. So congratulations to Kevin Cooey. We will of course see them in November in Saskatoon at the trials. I believe that's their last tune-up event before the slams. I don't think they're doing any more events that aren't going to be on TV before we see them in Saskatoon. So a great way to get into the television season for Cooey to get a win there, and good on Jaap van Dorp too, by the way, for getting into the semifinal of an event with that field.
Yeah, that's all.
All right. One other story that came up this weekend that I wanted to touch on very briefly, because we can't do it justice in the same way that it was done on That Curling Show, which returned on Friday on the CBC with Devin and Colleen Jones. Scott, this is a story of Adam Freelich and Charles Gagnon. Adam Freelich is the third for Team Como out of New Brunswick, and Charles Gagnon, he is the lead for Team Lawton in Quebec. And Adam Freelich for years has suffered from stage 5 kidney failure. And the team put out a release or on social media saying that he needed a new kidney. And Charles Gagnon stepped up and donated his kidney last week to Adam Freelich. All accounts are that they're both doing well. They were both on That Curling Show on Friday. But just a terrific story to come out of the curling world this week, and certainly a time where we can all use good news in whatever form it is. So a great story there. And I would recommend everybody just head on over to you can watch the whole That Curling Show, or they have segregated out this part of the show as a clip. So just wanted to highlight that, a great news story that came across the feed this week.
Wow. Yeah, great story. Glad to hear everyone's doing well.
Yes, and hopefully that continues. But as they say, it's the first few days when that happens that really is when you want to make sure that everyone responds well, and that seems to be the case. So as I say, great story. So I think that will do it for this week. Scott, what is your prediction for our game tonight?
Well, as long as I don't hurt myself, I think that will be a win.
All right. Yeah, let's go with that. So that's it for this week, everybody. Thank you so much for listening. If you have not yet, do subscribe wherever it is you get your podcast. Do the likes, ratings, comments, all that good stuff. And do follow us on social media at Game of Stones Pod. We were pretty active over this week when we were in the building, both on Twitter and Instagram. You can also find us on Facebook at facebook.com/Game of Stones Podcast, and head on over to GameofStonesPod.com. You can find all of our past episodes there. And if you click on the merch tab, you can find the aforementioned sweatshirt that Scott is currently wearing. Very comfortable on a cold, rainy day here in Ottawa. We also got the t-shirts and a toque, which you wore, Scott, to the event yesterday. Al Cameron, who does media stuff for Curling Canada, he's the director of that for them. He recognized us because you had your hat on. When everyone has their masks on, you don't necessarily know who everyone is, but Al recognized the hat.
That's right. And it was comfy and kept me nice and toasty.
It's always a good thing. And of course, as always, if you do order something, all the proceeds are going to go to the Sandra Schmirler Foundation and Food Banks Canada, and we are matching everything that comes in. So do feel so that is the case there. So Scott, with your purchase, obviously we're going to have to send that along and match it.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I'll make a donation at the end of the month, which is Thursday.
It is indeed Thursday. And of course, do let us know what you want to hear on the show. Game of Stones Podcast at gmail.com. Always excited to hear what your ideas are. Scott, you mentioned Thursday. Just want to say that is also the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. So there are events going on all across the country that you can go and you can learn more about reconciliation. And if there isn't an event that you can immediately access in your area, you can always go online. The National Center for Truth and Reconciliation has some online material there. Or you can just read the TRC report. So hopefully everyone has a chance at some point on Thursday just to note the day. And any small effort towards reconciliation is a great start.
Absolutely.
All right. So that's it for this week. Thank you so much, everybody, for listening. Scott, what do you want your first shot to be tonight?
Peel. I want to peel.
High hard one out of the game.
Come out hard.
All right. Well, we'll have to see how that goes, and we'll be back later this week to talk all about that. So until then, thanks for listening, everybody. And of course, keep those brooms on the ice and don't dump that intern.
Make the final.